is Andra and I make videos on history and leftist politics on this channel. Today's video is going to be a bit of a hard-hitting list of facts to do with Israel, both statistics, so numerical, and also historical. And before anybody says it, criticizing a country is not anti-anything and not anti-Semitic for criticizing Israel. These are things that have been backed up by multiple organizations of humanitarian help, and that includes Amnesty, and the UN themselves have said that Israel is committing crimes. So this is not anti-Semitic, this is not an invention, this is backed up by facts. In fact, I will be putting resources in my description box. So if you want to research anything, you can read my resources or you can Google things yourself. It's free, so might as well. Number 1. The myth of the only victim in the middle of the Middle East, where everybody else is trying to invade them. That's plain false. That's a lie. Israel has, at one point or another in history, tried to invade every single one of its neighbors, and most of the time succeeded and is currently still occupying land from these neighbors. So let's start with Palestine. Obviously, Israel is occupying the entirety of Palestine. That's no debate. But then we have Jordan. Jordan did occupy, or rather was given control of the West Bank by Palestinians, and Israel took that because obviously West Bank is now part of Israel today. And we also have Syria with the Golan Heights, which were taken by Israel, and we also have Egypt. And Israel has attempted to take both the Suez Canal as well as the Sinai Peninsula, part of it, and it has occupied the Sinai Peninsula and had to give it back to Egypt. I think around 50 years ago they returned it. So if Israel wants to be the victim, then why is it treating all of its neighbors so poorly? It just doesn't make sense. Their theory of victimhood, when they are the aggressor, like if you see a person abusing multiple people, you don't think that the victims are to blame, you think that the common denominator, which is the abuser, is to blame. So why do we make exceptions for Israel? On top of that, I want to say that all these historical facts are being shrouded by just excuses to do with the Holocaust, and I think that's horrible, to use something so dreadful to justify colonization and what you're doing right now. Number 2, we have the apartheid. So recently, Amnesty has admitted that Israel is apartheid, and there have been other organizations as well as other big names, such as Harvard. The Harvard Law University admitted that Israel is apartheid. What qualifies Israel as apartheid? Well, there is the fact that the refugees have no right to return. There is the passports having different colors and different types of passports. There is the roads system, so Israeli cars can drive one lane and then Palestinian cars can drive the other lane. There is the checkpoints and all the control around that. There was, at the start of the vaccinations for COVID, there was different vaccinations. So Israeli people were given vaccines by the Israeli government, whereas Palestinians were given nothing, and they had to ask other countries such as Russia for the help. And luckily Russia provided them with Sputnik vaccines, but yeah, that's apartheid if you don't give part of your citizens vaccine based on their ethnicity. There are also more recent things, such as the new marriage law, which is separating families of Palestinians and Israeli Jewish people. So I would advise you look more into that, because that's insane that it just happened now. There's also the fact that Israel is trying to control what tutors can teach in university in Palestine and what curriculum. So which tutors are allowed to teach and what they can teach. So that's apartheid, because they are trying to hide the history of Palestine. They're trying to control what is being taught to people, to brainwash them, basically. Now, it's become widely accepted that Israel is breaking the 4th Geneva Convention, which has to do with the, occupying a territory, and if you occupy, you have to be responsible for the people that you are occupying, which is Palestinians, and you also have to allow the people to stay there. You can't deport them, which has happened obviously twice, in 1948 and 1967 are the most notable times, but it's happened in between as well. Israel is not taking accountability for that. They are breaking international law. Let me give you an example on apartheid, right? Jesus would have been born in Bethlehem, which is Palestine, and he would have had a different passport from the parents of Jesus, Mary and Joseph, who were born in Nazareth. So Jesus by virtue of being Jewish, would have been given the right to return, so would have been given an Israeli passport. But had Jesus not been Jewish, that would have meant that he would need a military permit to go and visit his own family in the other side of the wall. And that would mean that, those permits usually last 2-3 days, that kind of thing, 72 hours permit. So Jesus would only be allowed to visit his parents under complex circumstances and for a short amount of time. Here are some statistics to do with the numbers of Israeli Jewish citizens versus Palestinians. Number 3, let's talk about refugees. So as I said before, there were 2 mass deportations, the Nakba in 1948 as well as another exodus in 1967. There were others in between and it still continues to happen to this day. So I don't know how much the Ukraine refugee crisis going on right now is skewing these numbers, but as of, before the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, we had 1 in 3 refugees in the world being Palestinians. Palestinians would make up the largest population of refugees internationally. And again, they are denied the right to return. Even though many of them have the keys of their properties from when, their grandparents got deported, many of them have proof that they were there and yet denied the right to return because that would skew the demographic of Israel if there would be more Palestinians than Jews. Number 4, let's talk about children. So there was a time in the 50s and 60s when kids were taken from Jewish families of undesirable, and I'm using brackets obviously, undesirable genes, and given to the Western European Jews. So this happened with Jews from Yemen, Jews from Southwest Asia, as well as Jews from the Balkans, where I'm from. They were given to other families to adopt them. And the way parents found out was because there was a problem in the documents and it was inconclusive. If the parent was the biological parent, they would get a letter from the IDF that their kid was recruited in the IDF, the kid that they thought was dead. This is how they found out, 18 years later when the kid had to do with military service because it's mandatory in Israel. They would find out, which is crazy. Imagine you think your kid is dead for 18 years and then you wake up and you get a letter, oh yeah, your kid is joining the army. And then you find out they're alive the whole time. They've been alive. And this is something the government recognized and they tried to pay the families who were affected emotionally by this. However, they were never giving enough recognition to this, enough apologies. They just tried to kind of pay it and brush it off. Hush money, that kind of thing. Not nice at all. And don't get me wrong, this is admirable that Netanyahu himself, who's really far in the right of the political spectrum, recognizes. It's amazing, but it's not enough in my opinion. And again, I don't think this is an isolated incident in Israel. This happened in the West as well. This happened in Switzerland, Australia and Canada, with kids being taken from poorer families and given to richer families. And let's not forget that this happened to us in Eastern Europe as well, with the Nazi Germany doing that with, if the kid was blonde with blue eyes from a Slavic nation, they would give the kid for adoption to German families to integrate into Aryan society or whatever the fuck. Number 5, we have Mossad, the Israeli, basically assassins, let's say, intelligence agency, but they're assassins. They have been acting on, this horrible missions of just killing people. Sometimes it's justified, but sometimes it isn't. Because I understand, you kill a Nazi, that's fine. I don't care, I'm not gonna cry for a dead Nazi, but it's just the power of this network is terrifying me. They have been doing different missions in, I counted 22 countries, but there might be more that we don't know of, or there might be more that I haven't found on the internet. So I'm just gonna list the countries that I found that Mossad has been doing different missions in. So it's the USSR, Argentina, Uruguay, Iraq, Italy, France, Cyprus, Lebanon, Greece, Norway, Switzerland, Spain, Uganda, Sudan, Belgium, Malta, Jordan, Syria, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, Tunisia and Malaysia. So these are the countries that I found that Israel has been in with Mossad agents, trying to carry out assassinations and other things like that. Again, I'm not gonna cry for no dead Nazi, I don't give a fuck. But just the network and the power that they have, and the fact that many of these are in the European Union and they're doing this stuff. Obviously it's not as much current as it is back in the 70s and whatever, but it just shows that the European Union has let them do this, and I don't feel comfortable living somewhere where they're allowed to do this. I mean, the UK is not in the EU anymore, but like my home country is in the EU, and I just don't feel comfortable knowing that they have that kind of sway over my country and over the union that my country is part of. Number 6, Gaza's population. So when we talk about how dense Gaza is, it's often compared to a prison. It's titled the biggest open-air prison in the world, and that's why you hear so many casualties when something happens in Gaza. It's like always civilian casualties, and Israel does this knowingly, because with Gaza's surface and the population density, it's almost impossible to hit any kind of airstrike and not strike at civilian collateral damage. And Israel knows this, they just don't care. They don't care. What they've done in 2014, and also like last year as well, what they do, they know the damage they will cause, and they just don't care. Number 7, this is for my people in the UK, my friends and maybe enemies as well. We have factories that produce drones and arms that are being sent to Israel to kill Palestinian children. We have this thing called Elbit Systems, and there are 9 factories at the moment. There used to be 10, but activists and amazing people such as Palestine Action have managed to shut down one of them. These things are in your community, 9 left. What are you doing? Why are you tolerating this? You're paying your taxes, and your taxes go towards killing children. Not just in Palestine, but also in Syria and like other places that Israel and Mossad have control over. They are killing people with your tax money. And that's pathetic. Need to do something about it. This is why you need to sign up for Palestine Action if you live in the UK. Also for other organizations similar like that. If you think that Palestine Action is a bit too risky, just go to a standard protest. That's fine as well. You're still making a change. The worst part about Elbit is that in their own business pitch, they claim to be battle tested. This is something that they use as a selling point, is the fact that they killed Palestinians in the past. It's just dreadful. It's horrible. Number 8, US funding. So this is for my US friends and enemies against him. Your taxes are paying towards Israel. The US is funding billions to Israel per year. Israel is the only country that the US is giving this much money to and this many guarantees to. Think about it, my country is in NATO. We have to pay NATO to be in NATO. This is why we should fucking disband this shit. Like, I'm so tired of my country losing money to NATO and America, which is the main country in NATO. Like, let's just stop pretending like America and NATO are not the same thing. They're giving money to Israel instead of helping the other NATO countries as well. Like, what's the point of this alliance? There's no fucking point. Their claim is that they are, the only democracy in the Middle East. Israel is clearly not a democracy, and also there's the fact that, they're the only ally that America has in the Middle East. That's true. It's only a logistical thing because they need control over that region, and this is the only way they can get it. So if you're American, go and do something to stop that. Number 9, let's talk about the famous stone throwing. So Palestinians often get sentenced for throwing stones. They're often children. The thing is, another part of apartheid is that they get trialed in a separate court compared to Israeli criminals. So when an Israeli person does a crime, they kill someone, whatever, they get trialed in civil court, which is like the normal court that you, if you live in the West, you would get trialed in. When Palestinians do something, they get trialed in military court, because it's a war, like an active war. So when they get trialed in this court, in the military court, the conviction rate percentage is almost 100%. So it's like 99 point something percent that the chance for them to get convicted. And they trial kids as old as 12, or as young as 12 rather, as if they were adults. The maximum sentence for throwing stones, even if you are a kid who is 12 years old, is 20 years in prison. Just think about that. What do you think you get in the West for, let's say, rape? How much you get in? Probably less than 20 years for rape. And they get 20 years for throwing stones. Even if they hurt someone without intent. Even if the Israeli person jumps in front of the rock or whatever, or lies about the rock being thrown, they can get 20 years. Number 10. Israel has been using weapons that are forbidden by international law, or weapons that fall in this like gray area between, they're not actually illegal, but everybody agrees that they're not moral, including the biggest organizations for human rights. So that would be white phosphorus. When they used it, it was not forbidden. I'm not sure if it is now, but obviously everybody would say that it should be, like everybody's advocating for it. It burns your skin, it's like horrible. I would say, I'm not going to describe these weapons at length, because first of all, it's just depressing. And secondly, I'm not an expert in military warfare, so I would say Google all of these weapons. I'm just reading out what experts have been saying about this. So there is the white phosphorus that I mentioned before. There is cluster munitions that are used in Lebanon, which means that they are still in the ground. and they are still hurting kids to this day, even though the war is over. And that's the same with the landmines that they put in Lebanon. They are still there, and people are just like randomly walking on one and dying like years later. There's a thing called DIME, which is dense inert metal explosives. And then there is another thing which is called armor-piercing bombs, which I assume just means what the name says, which are forbidden by international law, and Israel is using them. And now we finished with the 10 facts. I'm just gonna give you 2 bonus ones because I'm feeling kind today. So there is the fact that many Holocaust survivors have been speaking out against Israel and comparing what Israel is doing to Palestinians to Nazi Germany. Now, I don't think we should compare everything to Nazi Germany. I think it comes a bit too light when people, for example, compare the riots at the Capitol in America that happened, like a year ago. They compare that to Nazi Germany, which I think is absurd and stupid. Comparing the conflict between Russia and Ukraine to Nazi Germany is also equally stupid. These kind of things are stupid, but if you're a Holocaust survivor, you can compare whatever you want to Nazi Germany. You can go to supermarket and compare it to Nazi Germany. I don't care, because you are the one who's lived through that experience. I'm not going to speak over. I respect it. These amazing activists have been ostracized and censored by their own community because of what they think. We often see young Zionists, many of whom are not even Jewish, who mock these old Holocaust survivors for talking about Palestine in a positive light, even though these people are like my age, like in their 20s, they haven't lived through that horrible ordeal. They don't understand it, but they are choosing to talk over people who have actually lived through it. And lastly, this is something that I haven't been able to comfort myself, but do your own research, honestly. Take this with a pinch of salt or whatever. Maybe it's not true, but I do feel like it could be realistically true. So in the first 2 weeks of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, it has been said that the amount of shelling that Russia has done was comparable to the amount of shelling that Israel did to Gaza in 2014 in 1 hour. So 2 weeks in Ukraine equals 1 hour in Israel. Now, I think that could be plausible, because if you look at the buildings destroyed in Ukraine, there are a lot of buildings still standing, whereas Gaza is completely destroyed. And also the amount of munitions that Israel would throw, or like amount of sharing they would do in a small surface, is guaranteed to cause a lot more victims than what Russia would do in such a big country like Ukraine. So the damage is not comparable anyways. The fact that, you have the Ukrainian people being welcomed with open arms as refugees, which is amazing. I'm happy for them. However, this has not been extended to Palestinians. Palestinians are still to this day treated like shit by the international community. Their culture is erased. Their flag is being forbidden everywhere. It's like treated as if it was like the Nazi Germany flag or something. It's just horrible. Again, take this last one with a grain of salt. I just thought it was interesting. I haven't been able to verify it 100%, but again, I'm not an expert in warfare, so the rest of them have been thoroughly researched by me and also confirmed by organizations with a reputation and a track record of, saying the truth. So you have to believe them if you have any logic in your brain, because I do get Zionists sometimes who just lack the logic. So I'm just trying to weed them out, If you watch until the end, thank you so much. I am still experimenting with this new channel. I know that I might not be doing the best work right now because I'm just getting started, but I'm hoping to increase the quality of work and one day expand this and maybe get a team and we can spread the truth. There is a lot of censorship going on in the world right now. If you have an opinion that is on the left, you are getting censored. It's dangerous out there. So if you're one of my comrades, then just be careful and, take care of yourself. Thank you for watching. Like this video if you like it. Comment down below what you think. If you have any facts that you would like to add, any statistics that you think are dreadful about Palestine and Israel. If you want to talk about anything, you know where to find me, down in the comments. Subscribe to this channel. I'm trying to build up an audience here as well that is more interested in politics, because I know my other channel is not maybe as useful for that purpose. So yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you. Bye bye.